Hi, this is Heather Oriana Petrocelli here with Charles Le Guin on May 16th, 2017 in his home. We're here today to talk about Professor Le Guin's time at Portland State College and Portland State University. So, I'd like to start by just asking you a little bit about your educational background and how you came to be employed at Portland State College.
Okay. Well, I grew up in Georgia, and all my education was in public schools there. And I went to Mercer University, which was an old Southern Baptist institution in my hometown, in Macon. And my time at Mercer was interrupted by a brief stint with the U.S. Navy. And then I came back with some GI Bill, which was very useful, and finished up at Mercer. And I decided I wanted to have other experiences, so I had fallen in love with Chicago when I was in basic training at Great Lakes, and so I decided I would go for a master's. I had enough GI time to go get a master's at Northwestern in Evanston in Chicago. So that's what I did. And then, not knowing what I was going to do next because I had no more GI Bill and not any income, I had one of the great bits of luck in anybody's life. I finished at Northwestern in December. I'd gone up in January and done my master's in that year, and was headed back to my home in Macon, Georgia. And I got a telephone call from Professor Galpin at Syracuse University. Professor Galpin was a Northwestern, had his degrees from Northwestern, and was an enthusiastic Northwestern alumnus. And he was looking for somebody to teach Western Civ. And there I was, the only person coming out of the history department in December of that year. And so I got the job at Syracuse and went up there and taught the rest of that year and the following year, and was now ready to go back to graduate school. And I considered Syracuse, but I think rightly for me anyway, it was best to go elsewhere. And I thought, well, I think maybe I would like to go back south, so I applied to several Vanderbilt, Chapel Hill, several places that were, and Emory. And I needed scholarship help, and I got the most money out of Emory, so I went there and stayed until I got my doctorate. Is that?
Yeah. Just as why history? Why did you pick history out of the gate?
That's a fair and interesting question, because as an undergraduate, and indeed all along in my career, I sort of did double major, history and English lit, and well, I think I just decided I didn't want to spend all of my time grading lit essays, and I loved history, and I actually had very good instruction as an undergraduate, and so that's essentially, it was the flip of the dime, so to speak, and I'm glad I did that. I always took lit courses though, all through my career, right on up to I finished at Emory.
You finished in 1957?
I believe that's right, yes.
So how, from graduating with your Ph.D. from Emory, did you wind up at Portland State College in 59?
Okay. Oh, sure. That I can remember quite well. Well, excuse me. Emory was pretty new to in turning out doctorates. I was the sixth and the first in European history, and I think the oldest at this point. I think the other five are dead. Anyway, what was your question?
I just wonder how you got from Emory to Portland State
all
College.
right. So I had to find a job, but in the interim I had married and had one daughter, and I needed to have employment. So I simply wrote letters, about 60, because Emory really knew it, graduate work, at running a graduate program and helping. They weren't much help to me, and that's all the help I had. So I just wrote letters, sorted the places I might be interested in. I think I wrote 60, and let me backtrack just a moment. The only real help I got from Emory was that the guy I did my dissertation with had a friend at Penn State, and they were looking for somebody, and I got invited to come up, and I didn't get the job, needless to say. And as I look back on it, I think I'm really glad I didn't. Anyway, so it was really just a matter of writing letters, and of course the next step would have been some hiring agency, but I didn't have to go that far. So I got some interesting responses, and it ultimately settled down to two possibilities. One was the University of Richmond in Virginia, and the other was University of Idaho. And I took the train up to Richmond to be interviewed there. I have to tell you this story because it certainly was the deciding factor. The chairman met me at the station, and he was very pleasant. He took me to his home to have breakfast, and he obviously was a devout Christian. I knew about those from going to Mercer, which was devoutly Christian. So there was orange juice on the table, and I reached for my glass, and he said, "Don't you say grace?" And I answered honestly, "Yes, but we never do it at breakfast," which was true. And so I think I could have probably had that job, but I didn't want to go to, I'd had enough of that as an undergraduate at Mercer. I waited, and Idaho came through, and so we went to Idaho.
Georgia to Idaho.
From Georgia to Idaho, where I had never been, of course, and I don't think Ursula had either. But Ursula's West Coast. She's California, grew up in, loves California, and we went there, and it was okay, but it wasn't. I didn't hunt bear and fish and do things like that, and there was an awful lot of that. And we had 3 years there, and one child and another on the way when we left. So then I had to start all over again, and again, certainly I knew that if I thought at any rate that if I was perceived to be looking for another job, my days at Idaho would not be productive for me anyway. So I just began to write letters, and mainly up and down the coast because we wanted to stay west. And one of the positive responses, maybe the positive response, came from Portland State. And I have to tell you about trying to get out of Moscow without my purpose being known, because I really was concerned. It has to do with the whole nature of the university and the department there at that time. So, am I talking too much?
No, not at all.
So we had a Volkswagen, which was not common in that part of the world at that time. I mean, you go into a station and they didn't know where to put the hose. Anyway, and the only place to get it serviced was Spokane, which was 100 miles away. And so I proposed that I needed to go get the car serviced on a weekend. But in that community, everything was known, and so I felt I had to have some excuse for getting out of town. And that's the excuse. And I was aided in my treachery, or whatever it was, by a really neat guy named Jack Van der Wettering, who had come to fill in one of the faculty members in American history, had died in the fall term. And so they hired, Jack was just finishing up at Seattle at the University of Washington, and he came, and we just got on really well, and so he helped me play the game and drove with me over to Portland, and that's when I discovered Portland State, which, you want me to go on?
Yeah, please.
Which consisted then of Lincoln Hall, Old Lincoln High School, and a series of houses to the south of Lincoln Hall. In the first block, 1/4 of that block was being constructed when I came for my interview, which was in an old residence house on Broadway, and that's the rest of the block was filled up with these houses. And so anyway, I came to meet several members of the history department. George Hoffman, who was dean in charge, the head of social science at any rate. Fred Cox, who was the sort of chairman of his history at that time, and who had founded the Middle East Studies Center, the first undergraduate such thing in the country, I believe. Charlie White, I think Basil Dimitrition. I think probably that was it. Subsequently, I met the others. Maybe Maury Webb was there that morning, but I know that Basil and Charlie and Jeff. Oh dear, that's terrible.
Trying to see if I can see. Well,
Yeah, all right. It's just slipped my mind. Jess Gilmore, and George Hoffman were there, and they were really nice. And I dreaded. I always dreaded that sort of thing, but it went. It was comfortable, and they were interesting men, pleasant to talk to, and Charlie White, just amazing. Anyway, so I had the interview and spent the night in Portland and managed to get back to Moscow without being discovered. I think. Anyway, that's how it started. And then I had to wait to see, and as I had no other fish in the online, I really wanted to hear, and I decided it looked like a really neat place to come to. These were neat people, and it would be nice to live in a city again. And so anyway, it did come. I can't remember how soon, maybe 10 days, an offer, and which I quickly accepted.
what were your first impressions of Portland?
But
Or Portland State College. I mean,
Yeah,
what
yeah.
were-
Well, I told you
Yeah.
of all that existed at Portland State College were these fine old houses, and the one quarter of Cramer, the southwest corner of Cramer Hall, and they were working on the southeast quarter as well. And well, anyway, I I was delighted. We were both Mercer as well. Delighted with the prospect of living in the city, though you can't believe it, what a small city it was. The tallest building in town at that point was Pacific Power Building, just down from Portland State toward the heart of town. I think about 25 stories maybe, and I got to know it pretty well because we banked. It was the closest place to bank to the campus, and we banked there until we moved into this neighborhood. So I got the job and boldly asked if there was any help for moving, and they gave me $200 more a year. So I thought that's pretty damn fair. And anyway, it looked like a good place to come. And I know Ursula was glad to get out, and so we did. We moved here, and everybody was very helpful in trying to find a place to live. We rented a house on Southwest 3rd, just sort of over the Burlingame, Fred Meyer's, in that area. Nice little, looked like anybody's little farmhouse, but up the hill from the market. And so my years at Portland State started.
Yeah. In 1959, the French revolutionists from Georgia landed in Portland.
Yeah, yes, I did. Basically teaching Westons. Oh, it was wonderful.
So I read, I know you wrote a 38 or so page remembering Portland State College thing for Portland State University. So one thing I want to ask you is about the intellectual and cultural life of Portland State College, as it moved into Portland State University in 1969. But it seemed that you and Ursula were very actively involved in the.
Oh, I do talk about that in that thing, but it was amazing. Or a place that didn't have facilities, just wonderful things went on. Theater, and particularly music. It was there was no music was mixed up in terms of occupying space with everybody else. They didn't have proper facilities, but they managed to do all sorts of wonderful things. They started doing operas, and as they have ever since, and very, very well. And I heard numbers of pieces I have never heard elsewhere before. And David Block, who was in the music department, founded a new music ensemble, which was pretty spectacular. And Bob Crowley was deeply involved with musical activities, both in the city and at the college. He was one of the founding fathers for the Community Music Center. I don't know whether you know about that now. It's a real conservatory for kids up to, let's say, 18. Musical kids. All of our kids went there, and one, our oldest daughter, is a musician. Anyway, we got to know those people because we love music. It was very, very exciting. And then, of course, there was a symphony orchestra, which we could No opera company at that time. The operas were put on; they were just odd-lived. But there were the things that you get in a city. And at that time, it was a small city that didn't, that you weren't afraid to drive across town. So it was just really ideal.
I know that you wrote you had this quote in that paper that we
Yeah.
mentioned. This is about your arrival in 1959. You said
Yeah.
that it was wonderful. What was wonderful about it all was the sense of growth, of expansion, of development, and optimism about what PSC was, a close-knit college full of energy, hope, and striving, collegiality. I'm curious, just if you can expand a little bit more on what it felt like to, when you mentioned the department, the history department, I think you mentioned 5 other men, so maybe there were 6 of you total. But it was a very small campus back then.
Yeah. Oops, Earth will get it. It's probably for her anyway. She's got a phone right by her bed. Sorry. Well, we were certainly because of the limited space, we were certainly all mixed up together. They did sort of keep the social sciences in a corner of Cramer Hall as it developed, and the corner would be ultimately at first was the southeast corner, and now it's basically the southwest corner of that building. When the southwest corner was, we were moved over there. But it wasn't just, we shared it with geography, and I think sociology. I'm not sure about that, but I know geography because Clark Brooke and I shared an office. All office space, proper office space was shared, and in fact, once I shared an office with, there were 3 of us in an office, all historians in this case. And then there was the so-called bullpens, a big hall room with a little division, which gave you a place to hang your hat, but not really adequate for getting your business done. It was okay, but the lovely thing about this, it meant that you got to meet and become real colleagues with people in other social science divisions. Joe Blumel and I got to be friends because he was in the bullpen with me, and that was true of others. So there was the physical stirring up, dictated by the lack of space to separate people out, and I'm not sure but what that was a good thing, particularly in the developing years of the university. I'm sure it was. I don't know about now, but it was really very, very exciting. And there were 2 bullpens. One, well, I won't try to describe it because my geography would get confused.
But there was there was the physical, physically the divisions are all kind of together, but then also intellectually you have this.
Social science. Social science was basically in the southeast corner of Cramer Hall, and then as the northeast corner was finished, some of them moved into that, and in time, history moved into the southwest corner, and the northwest corner was occupied variously by music, but also then for a long, long time by the president's office and the administration, and then different things happened on different floors, but I'm describing the top floor, which is where history was always located, on the top floor, of course.
Well, so because you had, I mean, you had a career that started in 1959 and it ended in, you retired in 1995?
I think that's
Ish.
right.
So
5 or
you
6.
have a, you know, decades spanning career. Mike, I have a question about, we've talked about the fact that, you know, my research was with Anders Steinem and the Center for the Moving Image, which was incredibly decentralized, meaning to exist in that, you know, milieu of intellectual and physical commingling between divisions. So in your time, there was the departmentalization of, you know, of all of PSC, PSU. So living through that, could you talk a little bit about what it was like when it went from divisions to more entrenched departments?
Before it was, the departments became so entrenched.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think part of the flow and mixture was dictated by the simply physical fact of space. We had to be all thrown together. And I think it was wonderful because some of my very best friends came from other departments, and this process of building classrooms and so forth by bits and pieces continued. The Smith Center, which is in the block south of Cramer Hall, was built in halves, and then subsequently Newberger Hall was done the same way, and then somewhere along the way Shattuck School was acquired. So I can't give you the date now, but in time, let's say in a matter of 10 or 15 years, the solid physical campus appeared. And as it did, it got, you know, things got separated out. You didn't find an English professor in the office next to you. This may be an exaggeration. He would be over in Newberger Hall. But in the early days, it got really wonderfully stirred up together, and became that in a sense is how we met and the Dynams. I mean, got to know them. You would know other people because of the faculty was not that large, but you could still recognize a fellow faculty member. But getting to know them socially and as close friends was expedited by the stir in motion before people got shuttled into their own building and so forth. Anyway, that is how we met. Well, we met them through the Nussbaums in physics. Now that's a long throw from somebody who had trouble getting through science courses, but somehow I think it was basically on political issues. We got to know the Nussbaums, and our children went to school with them down here at Chapman. And Rudy was very active in all sorts of ways, but very active politically. And these were exciting political times. So we got to know, and then through the Nussbaums we met and got to know socially the Dynams. And similarly, I met people in the English department. Well, Hilda Weiss, she was gone by the time you came, I think. A wonderful, wonderful woman. We taught night classes. That's how we met. we would come out of our classes at night cross-eyed and make for the bar up the street, and she was wonderful. And we met Jim and Helen Hart, and they became very close friends of ours. The Biermans. So our social and intellectual community expanded, and it was easy because people weren't shuffled off into a corner with only their own kind, and I think it was a wonderful thing to come into.
So
yeah.
So
I mean,
oh, go ahead, please.
Historians are nice people, and I've never regretted that I chose history, but I would hate to think of going through life and not knowing people other than historians.
Yeah, so I feel like we've covered a little bit the cost of departmentalization and what is potentially lost. I mean, there is a loss of that constant intellectual commingling. And I think you have like the Middle East Studies Center, you have Center of Moving Image, you have the New Music Ensemble. We'll get to the honors program, but you have these innovative and vigorous programs, as you mentioned, that I think did come out of a lot of that commingling that was there.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about the benefits when departmentalization happened, and as the history department was becoming more, there was basically policies all of a sudden, and how it developed.
Oh yeah. Well, I didn't mean to derive departmentalization. I mean, it derived it. It's just that. Well, to be quite frank with you, I would regret. I would be I would probably have been less happy if I had only been able to have friends in the history department. And part of that is that my wife isn't an historian, and she's a literary person, and she enjoys that type. So it without any intent, I think it became without any intent, but a good deal of luck by the nature of the place we were. We got to know and become close friends with people like Nussbaum's Dynams, Jim and Helen Hart, and others, but those especially, and it was wonderful, and it was so easy to translate that into academic terms, because Jim Hart and I taught classes together. I had been an English and history major in my undergraduate days, and I always took literature courses in my graduate work. So there was no problem. I don't know whether this is still true or not. I hope it is, but we could just mix it up, and we did it for several terms. Then he got ill and died. So the tightening of the academic model into what is the generally accepted academic model was beginning to set in, I think, probably in the 90s. I mean, this sort of hodgepodge thing that I like so well continued a long, long time. Yeah, and I don't know there's any intent that this happened. It's just the way as a building was built for physics, it moved out of the for English they moved out, and So it became, in some ways, a more traditional college, university. By the end, by the time I retired, it was headed that way.
Was it exciting to watch that transfer when you're living it? Is it just slower moving around you? Because like when you started, there were a handful of buildings, and as of 2015, I believe, that's the last time I knew a count of the buildings. Yeah. PSU has 54 structures now.
Good Lord, I didn't know that. But I know they have sort of grabbed a building here, built a building here, grabbed a building here.
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah, and this is fine. I mean, after all, for many years, 5 to 7,500 students was for the early years was the way it went, and it got to be 3 times that big, and you've got to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just glad I had the earlier experience. Now, I'm sure I would have been. I didn't retire because it was changing in the direction, because of growth. I retired because of age.
What has retirement meant to you?
What has it meant to me?
Yeah.
Oh, it's meant a lot of time to garden, which is one of my great pleasures. Alas, I can no longer enjoy it because I'm not physically able to. So it grieves me to look at my garden. Ugh. And everything is growing so at this point. And it meant, a certain amount of freedom. I suspect I read more literature than I do history now, for example, which is sort of going back around to my early days. And it meant having some really close ties develop with continue with some of my colleagues. I see Charlie White, for example, basically once a month for coffee. He's a most remarkable man. And Linda Walton, who lives just up the hill from me, I also see her for coffee. And I saw Ann Weichel, who just died. Similarly, we had a really nice coffee group. Hildy Wise, Michael Ridden used to come. It's degenerated by death and inability to move. But it carried on for a very long time. But, so I see that. I do not go to campus. I don't mean to say that so absolute, but I felt watching certain retirements before my own, when the retiree couldn't let go and was in some respects either patronized or resented by that fact that he was always hanging around, and and I was determined I wasn't going to let that happen. Anyway, figured I had done my duty, and so I returned to gardening and reading.
Yeah, that sounds lovely. You've had a few decades of that.
It's just true retirement.
Well, going back to your time, just because you have had that career that starts in the 50s and ends in the mid 90s, I was curious to kind of let's just go through the list of the presidents that you lived through at PSU. So
you'll have to help me with that.
Well, you just missed Cramer, so I don't know if you would have any.
I just missed Cramer. Yes, so, he had just been replaced by I think Millar, and I started the same year.
Yeah.
And I was chatting with Charlie White, who was more deeply involved with administration and everything than I ever became. Not too long ago, about presidents, and he said, "Who do you think was the best president you?" And I said, "Well, I have to say Branford Millar." And maybe I shouldn't say this, but he said, "I agree." Yeah. And I do. he was a charming man and a true academic. I mean, but he also was in the cake was rising, and he was happy to be a part of it. But he could also take time off to come over and have coffee with there was a room in Smith Center for the faculty to meet for coffee, and he would be there every morning at a certain time, and he would sit and chat with us. He could also be very hard-nosed. I saw some of that by being on there was a little elected council. But he was a nice man, and I'm so pleased they named the library after him. I'm sure he would be too. Yeah. Let's see, who came after Millar?
Gregory Wolfe.
Gregory Wolfe. Well, Gregory Wolfe was a man of great charm, and I might just speak my mind, who could never quite forget that he wasn't at Reed College, and really found himself in a very tight and tense situation. The Vietnam War was raging, and there was a lot of opposition to it, and there were big demonstrations on campus. He just that sort of thing was not something he was gifted in handling. I think Portland State College was not the right sort of college for Gregory Wolfe, nor he the right sort of president for Portland State. Anyway, he didn't last long. He was a charming man.
You know, because you had mentioned the political turbulence because he was there 68 to 74, so he saw it become Portland State University. But do you have very specific memories of the May 1970 student strike?
The big demonstration in the park with the police and so, yes, I do. Bob Crowley in music instituted a weekly vigil in the park blocks in front of Smith Center, where you could just come and stand. It was totally silent. You didn't respond to any provocation, and there were almost, I don't remember any real provocations. People just didn't see you or didn't want to see you or just walked past, or sometimes they would come and join you. And that went on, I wish I could tell you exactly how long, but probably 3 years, 2 at least. Because there was a lot of activity in town in those days, marches involving students and faculty and townspeople. And it was a tense time. And now where were we? What was I going to say?
I was asking about your specific memories of the 7-day student strike in May of 70.
Yeah, and that was a sort of culmination of all this. And it was very tense. And Gregory Wolfe was incompetent to deal with that, to put it bluntly. Yeah. My colleague and friend Frank West who was involved in these things as I was, sort of flipped during the middle of that charge up park blocks. Had to be taken off to Pill Hill to the hospital. So it was a very tense and a very fascinating time, I must say. And I was so proud of the college, the students. They were really active in marching and in demonstrating and in having what we call be-ins on the weekend, that people would gather in places like Lair Hill Park and have sort of picnics and talk about things. It was nice. It was a good time. I was very proud to be in the community that was doing that. Yeah.
So then the next president.
Excuse me. Yes. That was where we left off, the big demonstration.
Demonstrations.
Greg's not very able handling of all that.
Yeah, and then it's like, then from Greg it goes to, you had mentioned that he was a friend, Joe Blumel.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Well, Joe was a young faculty member when I came in economics, and we got to know one another. In part because we were put in one of those bullpen things, and he was a person of great charm. He was unmarried at the time, so he was. My wife thought he was just luscious. Anyway, he was a nice fellow, and that has little to do with his presidency. And well, he had a good long run, didn't he?
Yeah, 74 to 86.
Yeah, that's about as long as anybody held the job. And perhaps he held it a little too long. It was sort of well, I don't know enough about it really to comment, but there was a sort of clique of people who were perceived to be running the university and gathered around him. Anyway, well, the university continued to grow and flourish while he was president, as I recall. Anyway, he died very soon after he was replaced. And who came then?
Nate Sigaro.
Oh my God. Oh, that was a really exciting time. Oh my heavens. That was a really exciting thing, that used car salesman. That was a sort of wonderful general rallying of the faculty, or some of the faculty, to get rid of him, and we succeeded. Yeah, one of the moving wheels in this whole operation was David Horowitz, who still teaches in the history department. And he was very active, and a large part of the faculty were very active in trying to get rid of him, and we succeeded. I think he was only around about 2 years, wasn't he? Yeah. And then he went off to someplace in Rhode Island and had the same experience. I think he's selling used cars in Los Angeles now.
Before we continue the list of presidents, I'm just curious, like, when the university changes hands, president to president to president, how different is the felt reality at the departmental level with leadership changes?
I don't think it's very great. I mean, the most immediate authority would be the Dean of Social Science, and as that was stably in the hands of George Hoffman, a quite wonderful man, throughout most of my career. I don't think the average faculty member, unless he was more deeply involved in politics and things than I was affected by these changes. And as except for Sigaro, as most of the people stayed around a while, you sort of got used to it.
So from Sigaro, with the ousting of him, there was the interim Roger Edgington.
Oh, Roger Edgington, that's right. He was a long time faculty administrator, and a very, very quiet, unassuming, able, I think, man. And he did getting rid of Sigaro was a very unifying thing for the faculty, particularly the young faculty who spearheaded the movement, like David Horowitz and John Moore in philosophy, and firebrands, some call them, and they perhaps were. But they succeeded getting rid of a bad apple. And then Roger sort of filled in an interim period until who was chosen?
Judith.
Judith, right,
Judith
the
Ramaley.
first woman, who was an impressive person, and she's still around. Yeah, she went on to Vermont and then someplace in Minnesota, and is now back at Portland State and on the faculty.
Were your impressions that she was a good president for the
I
university?
think so. Yes, I think she really was. It may have been hard for her to be the first woman president.
And
The only woman president. I think it was, and I think there are certain elements in the faculty who didn't approve of her. But everybody I knew, well, Michael Ridden, who became acting president a couple of times at any rate, and who was much more involved in that sort of politicking than I. Thought very highly of her, and I thought so too. Yeah.
Did you follow, like after you retired? You retired during Judith Ramaley's.
No, I have not really.
Yeah.
Who came after? I'm curious. Who came after her?
After Judith was Dan Bernstein.
Dan Bernstein, yes. And
then it was Michael as an interim.
Yeah.
Until they found Vim, the current. But then they just announced yesterday
the
Ramat Shurishi.
The new choice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wish him well. I'm sorry, I have to say that I would have preferred someone from the liberal arts side of things. I don't think it necessarily means the reading I see in it that yeah, okay.
So you had mentioned, I don't remember if this was in person or in your paper, probably both, that your longest and most consistent college committee service was on the Honors Council, and you helped over.
Yeah.
So I was curious if you talked to me a little just about the formation and the honors, this honors.
Who talked to you about it?
I believe you talked to me about it.
Oh, okay.
But
Yeah.
when we met last time.
Yeah. Oh, all right. Yeah. Well, I don't know how much more I have to add, but it was a fun thing. I think it's very different from the honors program now at Portland. It was largely the creation of Judah Bierman and Jim Hart, and a few other people, and I got involved in it and taught in it, and it was less. I think it was less organized and perhaps it didn't really, in those early days, it didn't really offer courses as a unit but it just selected certain courses that were offered in, this is my memory at any rate, in various departments and made up a sort of core curriculum for honors students. And I'm sure it still does some of that, but I know that it now has a faculty of its own, and it really didn't have a faculty of its own when I knew it. Yeah. Some of us taught in it, most didn't, I think. But it was pretty much Jim and Judith creature. It just sort of arrived and took off. Yeah. Mike Ridden got very involved with it subsequently, and I think helped to make the transition into what it is now, a sort of self-sustaining unit of the college. And I guess it really wasn't a unit of the college in the days I knew anything about it. It was a sort of curriculum that people who wanted to be a part of the program had to take, and it varied from time to time. Yeah.
And how long did you stay involved?
Oh, until I retired.
You might, this is like kind of going back towards your retirement time and Judith Ramaley's time as president, so you might not be able to answer this, but I was curious with, it seems that Michael Reardon and Judith Ramaley, that the creation of university studies was their thing, and
yes, I think it very much
with the
was.
capstone.
Very much was, yes.
Did you notice changes in the classroom when that happened?
That
What-
something like the good students were all fleeing somewhere else.
Well, no, I
Yeah.
guess I just mean, like, was it like all of a sudden when university studies became part of the PSU curriculum, did the demographic of history, like the lower history classes, change a lot, or did they just kind of did it just stay the same? And
I don't think it changed a whole lot. The low division classes will remain fairly large and heterogeneous. Yeah. And some, as I recall, I may be wrong about this, some of the upper division classes were double listed for the honors program and for just regular, and there would be, in those I think there would be more, as the honors program became a self-organizing, sustaining thing. But it really wasn't mostly when I was involved with. It was just sort of selecting certain courses that made up a sort of preferred program.
for the honors, and then
Yeah,
for
yeah,
university studies,
Yeah.
did you see a larger influx of people taking history classes when the university studies became in?
Not to my knowledge, no.
And then also for Judith's time, did you, I know that Let Knowledge Serve the City became the thing, and the collaboration between the urban university with the city of Portland and the county of Multnomah. Was there any felt difference in your time as a professor when that was kind of taking root more and more?
I personally can't recall any.
I'm just curious.
By that time, I was perhaps less deeply involved in general college affairs than I had been in the past.
I take it from your Remembering Portland State College. I can't remember the line you had, but I remember it made me laugh. But it seemed that the administrative side of higher education, academia, had no appeal.
It never interested me. I was acting chairman for one term, or a very large part of one term, just before, I think it was Barney Burke became chairman. And that was fine, and that was enough. I never had that ambition or that desire.
So, because you had that long career at PSU, starting at like a very, very small college and ending at a large urban university, sitting in that, in that history department, well, you first were a division, then you were department.
Yeah.
Could you notice massive shifts between faculty and administration in your time, or?
I mean, tensions between.
Yeah.
I can't say that I did. No, I can't. I'm sure they may have been there, but as the structure of the department, or any department, emerged, it would be largely the chairman who would handle the relationship with the deans and so forth. And before that all became so structured, it was more give and flow. Not step by step, but I just think in the early days, the Faculty Senate, for example, was a sort of debating society, and I don't know if it still exists. I don't know what it has become. And we would meet. There was one dean of the faculty, and sometimes the president came, and this was in Millar's time, because he was very active. And there weren't so many of us, so we just could sit and talk.
Yeah. This will actually be my last question for today.
Okay.
Looking back, are there certain things that you're particularly pleased with, or proud of, or excited about during your tenure at
Oh boy.
PSU?
Maybe we'll have to come back to this question. I'll have to think about it. Well, I think the main thing that I'm pleased about is the success of that really podunk college that I came to over the years. Some of the things that have happened I'm either less interested in or would not have chosen to happen. I mean, well, this is going to sound really awful, but I don't know the man who's just been named president, but he's obviously in the technological business side of things, and that kind of, I mean, we had some real nuts for president like Cicero, but they all had their roots in the liberal arts, I think, more or less. Yeah, and that sort of disturbs me. But that's where the money is, I guess. Anyway, I'm very proud of the place. It's done. Though it's quite different from my time there, and I keep hearing about it from now. I'm not mobile and can't get down there, which I regret because I love to go to the plays and the music and the opera, but there's a time for everything. So, are we going to talk again?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for your time, Dr. Levin.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Just a sort of footnote. One of the things that pleases me most is the setting up of an archives, and she's a wonderful person, Miss Pasha, and I'm more power to you. I think, as I told you earlier, our papers would have probably gone to Portland State, but there was no facilities, and I think there is probably still not proper facilities for an archive, and mainly Ursa's papers have some importance. And so, and there is an institute of women in science, women in science fiction at Eugene, and that's where her papers go, and so mine will go with her.
It's just like the Le Guin papers are together.
Yeah, well, I want to be with her anyway.